really supposed to be for the audience, but it's much for me. All right. Oh, and also there's another reminder there too. There's a QR code at the top above the word reminder there. If anyone is interested in doing any of the open MOOCs that are sponsored by the U.S. Embassy and the State Department, they are open now. There's a whole new batch of topics. There's English for, I think, professional purposes, English for journalism, English for STEM, a bunch of different MOOCs that are open for the summer. So if you are interested, they are free. You can get a digital badge for participating. They look good on a CV or resume. They are interesting and useful. So that will take you to the open page where there's a bunch of new MOOCs that are open for the summer. All right, so in our session today, based with the topic of creative writing, we'll talk about what creative writing is, what its value is, and most importantly, we'll look at some different ways we can support our learners' efforts in being creative or writing creatively. And at the end, we'll also talk about something new we have, which is the Certificate of Mastery, and I'll give the details of that at the end of the session. All right, so I'll just kind of open this up to those of you who are joining us. I think some of you are starting to roll in. So I'm curious what your definition of creative writing is and what some examples are. You can go ahead and put your responses into the chat. And this might seem like a strange question, but one of my first teaching jobs, abroad was in South Korea. I went there to teach TOEFL writing and TOEFL speaking. And luckily about halfway through, they realized that there is more to student success than the TOEFL. And so they asked me to write a book and design a curriculum based on creative writing. So I was very excited about this. I had a lot of ideas about short stories and poetry, maybe even some drama. But when I sat down to talk with my boss, I realized that her idea of creative writing and my idea of creative writing were completely different. She wanted a book about different types of essays, like argumentative essays, descriptive essays, compare, contrast, things like that, which I don't consider creative writing, but she did, and it made me realize that it's always important to make sure we have a similar definition before moving forward. So I am looking for you all to share your definition of creative writing and or some examples of what you consider to be creative writing. You can share in the chat. Of course, you can also raise your hand and speak, share your ideas if you would like. So what do you consider to be creative writing, either as a definition or examples of creative writing? I also know we have a lot of creative writers in this group. Really? Is everyone shy tonight? No one has any definitions for creative writing or examples? I'm very surprised. It's not a problem. I also brought my own definition and examples. Okay. Thank you, Patricia. It's non-academic and very artistic. Okay. That's a nice description. So as opposed to that academic writing, I kind of mentioned earlier, essays and things like that, and this aspect of artistry. Excellent. I saw a hand raised, and now I can't see. Whoever raised their hand, go ahead and speak.
Hello.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have examples of creative writing. There are things like poems, maybe novels, fiction, maybe things to do with scripts, and maybe plays.
Excellent. Those are excellent examples. And yeah, I fully agree with you. Those are all examples of creative writing. Thank you, Modesta. We have some more definitions here now in the chat. Anne says, writing from your imagination, unlike academic writing, for example, poetry and fiction. Very nice. Yeah, this component of imagination, I think that's a key word. Nancy says, creative writing is any form of writing which uses imagination and innovation, and it may go against the normal forms of literature. Ah, so something not normal. Excellent. All right. So I was looking for a nice definition of creative writing, and I came up with this one I found from Duke University. It says creative writing is a form of artistic expression. So we had that in one of our definitions, this artistry. It draws on the imagination, which you all also mentioned, to convey meaning through the use of imagery, narrative, and drama. So when we think of creative writing, we have imagery, narrative, so some kind of a story, even if it's poetry, and some element of drama. And it includes poetry, fiction, for example, novels, short stories, scripts, and screenplays, and also creative nonfiction as well. So I think that's something important to point out. Sometimes we think of creative writing as only being fictional, but it is possible to be creative with nonfiction as well. And I think that's something we'll kind of explore more next week when we're talking about writing the personal essay. But yes, I'm happy to see what you have put in the chat and what Modesta shared with us. I think we're on the same page, unlike my boss and myself in Korea. So the next question is the value of creative writing. It sounds like in this like-minded group that we all place a lot of value on the importance of creative writing, but everyone may not agree with that. We see that not much is devoted in curricula to creative writing. When we are testing skills, the creative writing is usually not part of it. So some people may think that there isn't a value. I believe there is. I'm curious what you all think. What is the value of creative writing? A lot of you are very excited about this topic tonight, so it seems to me you value creative writing. Please feel free to share in the chat, or you can raise your hand and share your thoughts with us. Go ahead, Josiah.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Yes, I think one of the advantages, values. First, in any writing, the language is going to be tested. Grammar, among other things, but above all, in creative writing, will test the students' ability to imagine, to think beyond what you are teaching. So, like in poems, if a student can arrange words in any way and create something that's flowing from the beginning to the end, then the level of the vocabulary the student is using, or the writer is using, able to gauge, to check how the student, how rich in vocabulary and how creative that student is. So I think that's one of the values. Yes, though I also have a negative part of it, but for now, let me think of that.
Thank you. Thanks, Josiah. I liked that that your answer included something that's harder to put a value on, such as imagination and creativity, but also those things that I think are a little more clear-cut in terms of language, including that as part of it as well. In the chat, Patricia says, creative writing allows full expression of the writer's thoughts and feelings. Yeah, that might not be a way that students can express themselves in other ways, but creative writing is that vehicle. Modesta says, talents are exposed through creative writing and also enables learners to express their thoughts. Also kind of following up with what Patricia said. But also, yeah, I like this point about talents that may not show through in other ways of expression, show themselves in creative writing. Excellent. And Molly, I think you had your hand up. although now I don't see
Yeah,
it.
yes, my hand was up.
Go ahead.
Yes, yes, yes. Actually, my hand, yeah. I'm sorry, I got late. My device got some trouble in logging in. However, I just got on the value of creative writing. I think it tests and it even makes us to understand the imaginative skills of a learner. And then we also have the language prowess. You can assess how the student is progressing in terms of language. And then, of course, build construction of sentences from simple sentences, complex sentences, because creative writing always includes all those simple sentences, compound sentences, complex. So through creative writing, it's even important we can gauge the learner's capability in a sentence.
Yeah, I think that builds on what Josiah was saying, and in that it's a way for students to practice that and for us to view it and assess it in a way that may be more comfortable than other forms. For example, if we tell students to write an essay, it may be hard for us to assess their language abilities because maybe the structure of their essay is such a disaster, or maybe they didn't really write anything very interesting, and so it's not a good way to highlight their language abilities. Thank you. Those are good points. Josiah, can I turn this back to you? You mentioned that you also had a criticism. Do you want to share that now? I am curious while we're talking about the values of creative writing.
Thank you for that. I think sometimes we may not be able to gauge the scope, the extent to which to test the student, like out of word, because imagination may not, the teacher may not be able, if it's in class, may not be able to gauge to what percentage is this imagination going to be. So you can say the imagination was up to 100%, and then the second student did up to 20%. So somehow it may not be a very a good kit to test. Secondly, the students who might lack enough level of creativity may be disadvantaged if you did that as a whole class. So I think that's, but it doesn't not overshadow the merits, but I think that's part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Josiah. Yeah, I think it is important to show both sides. And I would also agree, well, I love creative writing, and I think it can help us to assess some things that are hard to assess in other areas. I would agree. I don't really think it's the best assessment tool, creative writing. Maybe for being able to look at language, sentence structure, things like that, it may be a good tool. But I think part of what you're saying too is that not everyone, some people are more creative than others. And so I don't think it's very fair sometimes also if one student doesn't have the creativity that another one has, and to compare those things in terms of formal assessment. So yeah, I'm glad you're bringing those things up. And I'm hearing this word assessment a lot. And I will tell you that my focus tonight is not at all on assessment, more in terms of kind of promoting creativity, activities we can use to kind of support learners in that area. But I haven't addressed assessment in all in this. I think it can be used as assessment, but I certainly wouldn't assess creativity itself, since that's just kind of a talent. I wouldn't ask two students to run a race and grade them on that. I don't think that would be very fair. All right, so in terms of the value of creative writing, sorry, I did not catch these. There's some more things in the chat. Oh, there's lots more things in the chat. Oh my gosh, how did I miss all this? Oh, okay. Okay, so it goes hand in hand with, okay, it goes hand in hand with reading. So it enhances reading habits. That is absolutely true. And if it does tend to happen that those who enjoy creative writing also are good readers as well. Oh, it allows us to use all of our senses, including the sixth sense, Austin. I love that. Yes, I think we don't talk enough about the sixth sense. David says creative writing involves the usage of language in a creative and artistic manner to express one's thoughts and feelings. That is a lovely definition. Thank you for, Austin, I saw you added the question back in. Yeah, it requires one to be imaginative. It does, which can be a challenge, I think. I think everyone is somewhat naturally imaginative, but sometimes we kind of lose that quality along the way as we grow older and we kind of box ourselves into these academic categories and then even further in our professional lives. Creative writing helps students to develop their literary criticism skills and inspires them to pursue excellence in the language. I couldn't agree more, Nancy. Very good. Yes, those literary criticism skills are developed through writing. Oh, we have the literate Gardner says it gives the learner an opportunity to explore the world through their imagination and gives them a valve through which they can vent their feelings, fears, and thoughts, as I think you do a nice job modeling for us through your poetry. Benedict says it creates active learners and also develops critical thinkers. Yes, you cannot be a passive learner when you're engaged in creative writing, and it does creative writing and critical or creative thinking and critical thinking, I think, are two highly overlapping areas. Teresa says it helps learners to think outside the box. Yes, this critical thinking and equips them with these critical thinking skills. Excellent, very good. So I think I'm just kind of repeating what you said here with my ideas, although maybe this one didn't come up. I find that creative writing can promote writing fluency. As students aren't worried so much about form and organization, they can be much more fluent writers. They have an idea, they have a story or something in their head, and so they'll just write. Writing fluency is important. It can improve the writing mechanics. Students have to use language, they have to use grammar and vocabulary, but they often tend to view creative writing as something low stakes. And so they don't have this stress and this high effective filter impacting them. As many of you mentioned, imagination is promoted, developed, grown, and fertilized through creative writing. And in doing so, we also find that empathy is increased as the learner imagines a character or a perspective through creative writing, and they can empathize better. Yes, 21st century skills. I think that's really interesting you mentioned that, Austin, because I think often we think of 21st century skills and we think of very like critical analysis and things like this. And I think often people don't link that with creative writing, but I think they are, they go hand in hand. I think this was a common comment in the chat that creative writing provides an outlet for emotions and thought, right? A way to give vent to our feelings. And sometimes a really important emotional outlet. It also helps us to clarify our thoughts and emotions. We may have all this wild imaginary stuff up here, but it may not be clear or organized. But once we have to write it down and put it on paper, it forces us to go through and clarify. And then I think that something very important is that it gives students a voice. They may not feel that they have the knowledge to put together a good academic article. They may feel that they don't have the skills to put together a speech or something like this. But often, if you give students a chance to be creative, they find their voice, which I think is very important. All right, but of course there are challenges. For some students, creative writing is very easy and comes very easily, but not for all. So I am curious what challenges you all come across with teaching creative writing and also with your students producing creative writing. Do you find challenges in the classroom? Do you find challenges with your students? If so, if you could share some of those challenges. I know I have. And of course, you can use the chat or you can raise your hand to speak. Go ahead, Amali.
Yes, one of the challenges I think that we face as teachers actually in testing creative writing is the L1. The learners, most of our learners are always affected by their first language. So it's sometimes difficult for students to put their thoughts in order because students, first of all, need to think in their language and then they have to change it in English, and it becomes even difficult and complex for them to write down. And then we also have the challenge of imagination. You know, by the way, I can remember last week I was teaching imaginative writing and I went with a piece of writing, an imaginative writing, of course. It was so nice. So I read to the students and they were like, ouch, what are you reading? You see, like the imaginative level of learners sometimes can really affect creative writing.
Thank you. I wholly agree with that, Amali. Those are two very different challenges, but both very significant. A student may be very creative and have very complicated, very creative ideas in their head, but transferring that from L1 to L2 can be very challenging. And then some students seem to lack creativity, or at least they can't seem to access it. In the chat, I think that Teresa is kind of touching on this. She says a lack of ingenious ideas. Anne says some students struggle with language and poor grammar, probably due to poor reading habits, and this demotivates them. Yes, those, even though creative writing can be easier to access in terms of language for some, if English is an issue or difficult, then they are still going to be frustrated and demotivated. Thank you. Jumas, go ahead.
Thank you. I would concur with the second reason to support it. Most of our students do not access, probably in their primary or early learning stages, they did not access storybooks and such literary material. So it becomes difficult for them to be creative. It affects their creativity because of lack of pre-exposure to literary material. And then this also affects their freeness in expression. So they always feel like maybe when they write something, they're going to make a mistake and they fear making the mistakes.
That's a really good point, Jumas. Thank you. Yeah, I also wonder too if maybe maybe kind of all the ready media we have out there. So we see a lot of younger and younger children spending more time maybe looking at videos on phones or watching TV. And some feel that that can reduce this kind of access to the imagination as everything is kind of provided for them. Thank you. Benedict, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
I tend to agree with those who've spoken before me. I think another challenge of creative writing is sometimes the learners might not feel creative enough, and that in hand also affects their confidence. So you find there's this self-doubt. The learners are a bit creative, but according to them, they don't feel it. They don't feel the creativity in their writing. So it affects their confidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that brings up a good point too. The kind of the artistic aspect of it can really tie into one's kind of sense of self. So yeah, feeling that one is not creative enough or lacks that ability can really impact them. In the chat, we have a lot of more challenges. Nancy says that time limitation and management. That's true. Often these kinds of exercises take more time. And then comes hand in hand with procrastination. Yes, those often go together. Nancy W. also says grammar. Yeah, it is still language. And if one is struggling with language, they're not going to be able to express themselves well. David says most of our students do not read a lot, and so they're limited in terms of grammar and vocabulary. So again, these language issues. Literate Gardner says, at times we have too high expectations on our learners. We see them as being poor in imagination. The task is to understand the learner's background and the work towards inciting their imagination. Yeah, I think that's very important. I think a lot of the role in teaching creative writing isn't so much teaching how to write creatively, but to facilitate different sorts of activities to get students to kind of tap into that creativity. So again, Eunice is touching on this grammar issue. Teresa with the language barrier. Very good. Nancy says the learners have the story, but putting it in writing is a problem. The teacher cannot read the story or understand, and there's many mistakes, spelling, grammar problems. And then the teacher feels demotivated to read it too. Go ahead, Austin.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about the question that is on you as a teacher and your students. And I wanted to talk about two challenges, one for the teacher and one for the student. First of all, I want to say that creative writing requires some high level kind of thinking. And that is partly contributed by reading. So we find that also if the teacher isn't reading a lot, then is not able to inspire the confidence in the students. So that is one of the challenges. And I think maybe teachers can share about their experience, whether they have enough books on creative writing in their schools. Because I think also that's an area that can be lacking, about having books dealing with writing or creative writing, and also taking time to just learn about writing as an art. So that is one of the challenges. Yes, then the other thing is now for the students also, there comes a challenge, because if the teacher has not also read a lot in terms of writing and creative writing, then there's a huge gap, such that, for instance, if the teacher has some good high level kind of thinking, then he has to find a way to bridge the gap with the students, because the students might be a bit low and all that, but so long as he can be able to inspire the confidence, you know. So the first challenge is for the teacher that he has enough information about creative writing as an art and all that. And then now the second one is on the students, which I think is affected maybe by their L1, you know, and also the fact that for most of the schools, English might not be the main language that they speak. So that can be also a challenge on their writing at the same time. And also the fact that some schools are not well equipped with enough books, since we know that writing goes hand in hand with reading.
Thank you, Austin. I think you're bringing up some really good points in terms of resources, materials, and the truth is it's very hard to be a creative writer if you haven't had kind of the input through reading materials and things like that. Very good. Thank you. Josiah, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think Austin has touched some part of what I want to say, but sometimes for people who are speaking, who are coming across English as a second language, rather they are not born in an environment where English is used frequently, or rather, if you compare somebody who is born in England or in USA, and then the ones like now the other countries like Kenya and so forth, you may not have enough vocabulary to put in your writing. Sometimes it becomes a limitation. I'll give an example of poems, whereby if somebody is writing a poem and you want those unique words, you want your work to have rhyming words, you may have a lot of limitations to an extent that somebody may need to go back to the dictionary. So I think that can be a challenge. It can take time if you're not very well equipped with those vocabularies that you want, So I think that's a challenge to me. And I find it's like somebody is speaking Swahili, born in Kenya, and somebody learns Swahili from other country. The level of language will be different. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're speaking to a theme a lot of people are mentioning, that students may have these ideas, but if they don't have the vocabulary or the language to express themselves, it's frustrating and demotivating. Absolutely. In the chat, Isaac says at times the challenges is one's exposure. Some learners tend to confine themselves in an environment they're used to. Well, that's very true. And they're not willing to explore and open themselves up. Very good. And then Anne is backing up Austin. She says, true, Austin, I was going to say the curriculum in certain conditions may not support a lot of creative writing. For instance, some classrooms are too large for this teacher to monitor and encourage the students. Yeah, and the teacher may not have a chance to read all of this writing, and that also can be demotivating. Jane says, sometimes the learners like inspiration. I remember when I was in my favorite subject and teacher was English. This was in high school and all the way to higher learning too. My teacher of English used to give us very interesting stories. Lack of inspiration, gotcha. Yeah, again, so we see these stories, this kind of input is very key to it. And then as Austin was saying, if a school or students don't have access to them, then this can be a real problem. Jimas, go ahead.
Thank you. I was thinking about the time that is located for teaching writing, especially in our curriculum. In Form 3 and 4, we have 8 lessons per week for English. And yet writing is among many other aspects, many other units of English that they're supposed to cover. We have grammar, we have literature, we have oral literature, we have oral skills. And so it's like writing is not given adequate time so as to cover up for the inadequacies that are there in the background of the learners, and also the time, the amount of resources that we have in our schools. So the curriculum and the resources and the timing that we are given is backtracking the interest that learners would have in learning to write.
Thank you, Jimas. I think that's really important. And yeah, it's a terrible feeling as a teacher to cut off someone's creativity because of time. But time constraints are a real thing. And yeah, they're just kind of not prioritized. Use of cliches, which are emphasized in primary, but not awarded in high school. All right, so I think you have all talked about a lot of challenges. Some that I oh no, we already, okay, I didn't. I find that generally with creative writing, of course, mechanics are an issue, meaning grammar, vocabulary, things like that. And then something that a lot of you have mentioned is students not being creative, or I find maybe being overwhelmed by the task of being created. And Molly, remind me to come back to this topic at the end about assessment, because I think it's very specific and it really depends on what we're looking for. So something I found that's really helpful, especially when first introducing creative writing to students, is balancing this idea of freedom and structure. One of the appealing aspects, I think, of creative writing is that it seems a lot freer. We don't have to have an introduction, a main idea, a thesis statement, supporting details. And so it seems very free. But that freedom can also be overwhelming. If someone says, oh no, you just write about whatever you want, it can be too much for students. And so I find that often kind of instituting a balance between freedom and then some sort of structure can really help students and also offer some support. So in terms of freedom, we might give a choice of topics or a choice of delivery. So whatever the task is, you can write a story, or you can write a drama, or you can write a poem. It's up to you. Being loose with the structure, that doesn't have to have a specific structure necessarily, or there's freedom in it. And then of course, freedom to use imagination, and they're not constrained by reality. But too much freedom, as I mentioned, can be overwhelming. So also providing some sort of structure. So students may have a choice of topic, but the topics should be tied to certain themes or ideas. While the structure might be loose, we might require some sort of specific language. So for example, if we've been working on past tense verbs, making sure that those are present in the writing. And having perhaps some structural constraints. So I'll give you some examples here. So this would be a very short form of creative writing. It's a blank comic. So students could be given a template like this. And so they have freedom. They can put whatever they want into these boxes. However, there is also structure here. We see that the structure is a conversation. It's a dialogue. And we see that there's a limit. There's a speaker, they speak together, and the result is something that they laugh about. So there's a lot of freedom in this, but there is also a structure built into it. For learners who cannot create a lot of language, they don't have a lot of fluency, this might be a nice task for them as well, a way for them to kind of warm up their creative abilities. So generally, I find using a template to be a very nice way to kind of balance freedom and structure. One of my favorite activities to do with studying Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech is to provide a template. So first, I've done this in many classes. We listen to the speech, we analyze the speech because it uses a lot of interesting devices such as metaphors and analogies, alliteration, things like that. But then after, students have a chance to make their own I Have a Dream speech. If I just told students, okay, now I want you to use your creativity and think about what your dream is and write a speech. Well, that's very overwhelming, write a speech, especially when we have to compare ourselves to Martin Luther King. So providing a template like this can be very helpful. We can do this with songs, we can do this with poetry, anything where it has a kind of a built-in structure. Martin Luther King's speech is great because it kind of uses this structure, I have a dream, I have a dream. And then this gives students a lot of freedom that they can fill in very short things, they can fill in very long things. They're able to exercise their creativity, but they're also given a structure to kind of confine and support them. So there's other ways we can spur imagination that relate to this. So we might have students rewrite the ending of a story that we read, or we might read the story to a certain point and stop, and then they have to write the ending, what they think will happen next. This is not a book, but if we imagine the Titanic, the story, if I said, okay, I want you to rewrite the ending, I want you to imagine that Jack did not die, that both Jack and Rose were rescued, they both survived the Titanic, write the ending. Do they live happily ever after? What happens to them? So that would be a way that we can have students exercise their creativity, but also tie it to something specific. We can also have them write from a minor character's perspective. Again, I'm using the Titanic as an example because it's a story I think most people know. So I don't know. I did not know who this woman is. She is Rose's mother in the Titanic. She has a very small role in the movie, and so many people may not even identify her. But if I said, all right, I want you to rewrite a scene from the Titanic from Rose's mother's point of view. So what does Rose's mother see? What does she think about what she sees? Well, this is creative writing. It forces us to use imagination, but again, ties us to something specific. So there is some structure involved. We can also ask students to insert themselves into a story. So imagine that you were on the Titanic, you're a passenger. What is your experience like? Do you see Jack and Rose? Do you meet them, or do you have your own adventure while you're on the ship? And then finally, another thing we can do is to rewrite a scene from a story from a different time period. So if we imagine the Titanic in the modern age, this classic image would probably be of them taking a selfie rather than just standing there. Or we could set it even further back in time. Again, this is a way for us to spur students' imagination, but also tie them to a structure. I will say also when we're doing something with creative writing, we want to warm students up. So I wouldn't just say, okay, now write this. Probably for all of these, I would have students imagine first, and then probably share some ideas through speaking as well. The other thing I've often had an issue with is students may really embrace creativity, but lose all sense of structure. Something that's a very common task for academics, but that relates creative writing, and something we'll talk more about next week, is personal essays. And personal essays involve a narrative, a story structure. And I have asked students to write stories, and it turned out they weren't stories, or ask students to write personal narratives. So write about a time when you overcame a difficulty, and they write something that really means a lot to them, but it has no narrative structure. There's no story to it. For example, I've had students write about how they really wanted to pass their exams so that they could attend a certain university. And so they studied, and then they passed the exam, and then they got into their university. That's not really a story. I mean, I'm glad that they succeeded, but there's really no story to it. It just, yeah, I wanted to do this, and so I did this. That's not a story. So one thing I've had students do is, first of all, analyze stories using the structure. So I think this speaks to something that a lot of you were saying earlier. Being a creative writer helps us be better analyzers of literature, better literary critics. And what a lot of you were saying too, that we need these examples, we need the input, we need to hear stories, we need to be told stories, we need these examples. Once I have my students understanding what narrative structure is, showing they can analyze it in something else, I make sure that they adapt it to their own writing. So narrative structure involves basically this: somebody wanted, but so. So somebody wanted something. This is basically the introduction, setting the scene. There was a man, and he wanted very much to attend the best university in the country. Somebody wanted, but there has to be a problem. A story is not a story if somebody wanted something and then they just got it. I was hungry, so I went to the store and got some food. That's not a story. A story has to have a but. It has to have some sort of a problem. So this man really wanted to go to the best university in the country. However, he had, I don't know, struggles with his English grammar. And then so is basically the rest of the story. So how did this person go about overcoming their difficulty? There's usually a climax in the action where maybe the student's test came back and he passed, and then whatever happens after that, or he didn't pass and what happened after that. But having this structure and making sure that students follow it does a lot to improve short stories and personal essays, I have found. And so creative writing doesn't have absolute freedom. It still does have some structure to it. And then one of the biggest issues with creative writing, earlier in the definition we looked at, we saw that imagery was a big part of creative writing. And students struggle with the details. They don't have a lot of imagery. So imagery is very important, and it's directly connected to language, which is something that a lot of you mentioned. Students don't have the language, then they can't say what they want to say. Well, having the language or being able to really depict something through imagery is a great motivator for finding the language and using the language. So here we have a very generic sentence. She walked into the room. There's really not much information here. I can't really picture much. It's a woman because it's she. She walked into the room. We don't know anything about her. And we don't know anything about her mood or anything like that. However, if I just change one word in this, we get a lot more information. This word walked, this verb, is very generic. There's a lot of synonyms for the word walk that have a lot more information. For example, if I tell you that she strutted into the room, we know a lot more about this woman. If she strutted into the room, we know she has a lot of confidence. She's walking into that room and she's really making an impression on people. So just one change in the verb there has changed this sentence completely. We could also opt for something else. Maybe she didn't strut into the room. Perhaps instead she stumbled into the room. Well, that tells us something entirely different. Maybe she's a clumsy person. Perhaps she's drunk, we don't know. But this is something entirely different. And so just by changing a single word in the sentence, it changes the entire story and changes the reader's perception of what's going on. And this is how we begin to build precise language into our writing, that our choice of words is very important. So it is now your turn. Here is a text. It's a very bland, generic text. The female walked into the room. She wore red shoes. She looked at the painting of the building. It was a bad painting. Remove it, she said. I don't know very much here. So I'd like to know more. So we're going to go into breakout rooms. In breakout rooms, you're going to rewrite this text so that instead of telling me what happened, it shows me what happened. So I suggest changing the underlined words, although you don't need to change them all, but these are all words that are very generic words and could be changed to be more specific. You can also add details to this as you like. And the result should be something, something that I can see rather than just there's a lot of just telling me what happened here. I want you to paint a picture of what happened in this scene. So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. You'll be able to see this screen. Again, I recommend changing the underlined words, seeing if you can find something more precise working together. And of course, you're also free to add details to this to make it more of a story. I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. Oh, we have a lot of participants. All right, so I have it set for about 4 participants in a room, so you'll have plenty of chance to talk. I'm going to give this 10 minutes because I think it's going to take a little time. I don't think you'll be able to finish everything, but you'll be able to get started on it, and I'm eager to see what you come up with. And then if you have any issues in your room, let me know. I'll be out here ready to help. Hi, Monica. Are you alone in your room? I can't hear you. You're,
No, not.
hi, can I help you?
I'm supposed to be in room 3.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I'm supposed to be in room 3, but I
Ah,
can't see the participants.
gotcha. It seems like there are other people in this room.
Yes, we are here.
Yes, there's other people. You can't see them, but you can hear them. They don't have their cameras on.
Okay,
Good.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Hi, do you need some help?
I mean, yes, we do. The text, you can't access the text now. It has just disappeared.
That's because someone else asked for help. Whenever I have to come to a room and help, it makes the text disappear. I'll go away and put it
Oh,
back up. Okay.
So it reappears now. Let me ask. So just using the words, substitute of the words that are here.
Yes, to
Okay,
make
thank you.
it, to give it better imagery. Exactly.
So when you disappear, the text reappears.
Yes,
Magic. Thank you.
like stilettos. Good.
Yes. Thank
All right. I think we have everyone back. You probably weren't able to finish, and if not, that's quite all right. And before we move forward and I get to see your work, I just want to point out that the order of the activities I showed you are also a form of scaffolding. I think it's important to remember that creative writing, like anything else, is something that can be very challenging for students, although many love it, not all do. It comes easy to some, but not to all. And so like any other skill or activity that we do in a classroom, we need to scaffold this. So just as a reminder, I'm going to go backwards for a moment. So we started here, which is very small amount of writing, probably had the most structure as well. So this is kind of an intro to creativity. Then I had this example here. This is also scaffolding up, a limited amount of language production and a lot of structures provided as well. Once we've kind of spurred the imagination, got it going, these activities here were really meant to develop the sense of imagination, to get students thinking about other ideas, other perspectives, something like this, and kind of delving deeper into their imagination. Once we have basically the content, we need to make sure that it is structured in a way that is organized to get the story or whatever it is across. Same thing with poetry or drama or whatever we're doing. There still needs to be some structure, but I wouldn't bring the structure into it until the ideas are there, because if we start with structure first, it's really going to stunt the creativity. And then finally, this last activity that we were just doing was show, don't tell. once we have the basic content, we have the structure of the writing, now it's time to work on the language itself. And so here we are refining the language of this piece of writing so that it's has more of an impact in terms of imagery. All right, so do I have any groups who want to share their masterpieces? Go ahead, Josiah.
Hi, we have, I was in group 1 with Robina, Maida, and there's a number, the number is not indicated. We worked on this. We replaced the words, and this is how it read. The lady strolled into the room wearing bright, bright colored stilettos. So instead of shoes, we used the stilettos. She stared at the room, at the painting of the room, and she said, "Remove it. It looks ugly." So that's what we came up with.
Awesome. I can imagine that much better. I especially liked the swap for stilettos. Stilettos are a very specific kind of shoe and not easy to walk in. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. I see a lot of raised hands. Jane, go ahead.
Thank you, Mina. We were with, sorry, let me just get the names. With Teresa and Isaac Mwangi in my group. This is what we came up with. A strong, elegant female walked into the room. She wore high heel red shoes. She glared at the painting of the skyscrapers. It was a terrible painting. "Remove it," she shouted.
Oh, she's angry, glaring and shouting. Nice choice of words. Thank you very much, Jane. Nancy, go ahead.
Thank you. This is group 7, and it comprised of Nancy M, Nancy W, Marcy, and Patricia. And as I said, we too changed a few words and added a few more. And this is what we came up with. "I saw a tall, flamboyantly dressed woman with a thin waist and broad hips dart her makeup-ridden face through the library door. She glanced at the wall and urgently modeled her way into the room, where she immediately went towards and glanced at the hideous painting of the high-rise on the cream-colored wall. Coincidentally, it matched the color of nail polish on her left hand, which she then threw up in the air and shouted, 'Remove it.'" Thank you.
Wow, quite a visual. Very nice. You all added a lot to that. Excellent. There's some great words in there. Flamboyantly dressed. Lovely. Thank you. Jumas, go ahead.
We were in group 4. I had Emily Joel, Fancy, Langat, and Irene. We added a few details to it. So this was our writing. "That was not to be a good day for the employees. Mrs. Smith, always known as Mrs. Hard to Please, stormed into the room with like a ferocious tigress. Her 6-inch red shoes clinked irregularly as if to depict the mood of the day. Her first glance was at the painting of the building, which she addressed with displeasure. Coming straight to my desk, she ordered, 'Who gave you the mandate to put up this ugly-looking archaic monstrosity of a painting? It should be out of here at the count of 3.
Ooh, immediately at the count of 3. That's quite a story. Thank you for sharing, Jumas. There were some other hands up, but they have disappeared. But I see we have some things in the chat as well. Okay, group 8, go ahead if you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. We were Mary and Rukia. I just joined the group late, but we managed something. This is how we did it. A blonde lady in red heels walked into the room and looked at the wall, strolling slowly, and wasn't amused at all. Surprisingly, she was the contractor manager and ordered for a redo. We all wondered who she was.
Oh, so we have this air of mystery. Lovely, thank you. Eunice, go ahead.
No, thank you. We were in group 2, and this is our story. This is how we came up with it. The young Italian lady majestically strolled into the room. She wore old, dirty, torn rubber shoes. She glanced at the painting of the old grass-thatched building. It was a horrible painting. Remove it, she called. That is what we had.
Very nice, thank you. Some key details in there to give us a better picture. Excellent. Room 4 has the elderly lady dashed into the room. Oh, you don't see elderly women dashing very much. Awesome. The elderly lady dashed into the room. She wore scarlet red high heels and she angrily stared at the painting of the wall. It was awfully painted. Remove it, she screamed, remove it! Yes, I agree. Jane did present you well. Oh, thank you for telling us who's in room 4. I like this, Mrs. Hard to Please. That's nice. We can see it in writing as well. Thank you. It is scary. I don't think so at all. These are just different ways to approach it. Okay. And thank you, Amali. So, oh, Caroline, go ahead and then we'll talk about assessment.
Okay, I will be speaking on behalf of group 3. So this is what I had to say about the show don't tell. The lady walks into the room. She has a red dress. She has a yellow dress on. She looks at the painting on the wall. It is not a bad it is not a bad painting. Keep it up. She yelled.
You have taken a very different perspective.
Yes.
You're the first person to have her keep up the painting. Very good. Oh, thank you. So you have all brought your own creativity to this as well. This was an exercise on language, but you cannot help but bring a little creativity to it. So in terms of assessment, one of the reasons I didn't address assessment is because it depends on what we're assessing for. If we are assessing, for example, if you are in a university assessing a creative writing class, your assessment criteria is going to be very different than if you are in a basic English class in a high school. And so you want to think about what you're doing the creative writing for. Are you doing the creative writing because you want your students to focus on language? Are you doing creative writing because you want your students to have a little bit of freedom and fun? Are you working on vocabulary? And so you're doing something like this that's very targeted. I think the whole objective that you have, the purpose for using creative writing would determine how you assess it. And so I would use a rubric. If I were going to grade it, I would use a rubric. And then maybe one category would be about the actual content. If it's interesting, there would probably be something about grammar, something about vocabulary. And if there's a certain structure we're working on, or maybe we're working on metaphors or analogies, then those kinds of structures may be a category in the rubric as well. But I wouldn't want to put a lot of weight on creativity itself, since that's something that
Call me later, I'm in a class.
that no one should be punished for if they aren't inherently creative. So hopefully that answers your question, Amali.
Yes, it does answers my question. Now, I also had a question that is always sometimes a little bit difficult for me to answer. I don't know if I can ask it now.
Okay.
Now, when asking students to write a piece of creative writing, now assuming a student writes a story and then they give you, let's say they come up with a very interesting story from the first paragraph, second paragraph, third paragraph, and then as you are moving with the most interesting story, towards the end, they are telling you that, oops, that story was a dream. Well, how do you think about that? Is it creativity or something?
That's fine. I think a lot of artists are inspired by their dreams. I would say that's not a problem. But actually what you're saying makes me think of something else, that the most impactful and useful creative writing classes that I've done gave many chances for revision. So often involved peers reading each other's work, giving feedback. After a couple drafts, students reading to the whole class, or students reading each other's work, giving feedback. And that remembering that creative writing is often more about the process than regular product. But if somebody said, well, actually it was a dream, if it really was a dream, then that's fine. They can use their dreams for their creative writing. If that's part of the story and it ends that was a dream, then I would encourage them to do something more with that, because it's not very satisfying to say, oh, and that was a dream. Well, how did you feel after that dream? Why do you feel that dream is worth telling? So I would ask them to go further with it than just say, oh, and it was just a dream. Leaving a reader on a cliffhanger. Remember, we were taught that if you find you have run out of time, it would be a good way to end it. Yes, with a little cliffhanger. Keep them reading so that they want the next installment. All right, so as I mentioned in the beginning, we have one more thing to talk about this evening. Hopefully you found something in our session that was useful for you. It's not a session on how to teach creative writing, but more about some ways that we can help our learners with their creative writing. But hopefully something in it was useful to you. And if not in this session, hopefully in other sessions you found something useful. As many of you know, we'll be wrapping up these sessions at the end of July. And then we will be giving out certificates of participation. But we're also going to be giving out certificates of mastery to those who do a little more. So what we're talking about is applying your knowledge so that you can earn a certificate of mastery. So to do this, you would choose a theme, an activity, or strategy that we've talked about in one of our meetings. And we've talked about many, many, many things. We've had, I think this might be number 23 or 24, but we've had many meetings with many different topics. We have videos and PowerPoints of many of them. So you would choose either a theme, like a whole topic, a strategy, or even something as small as an activity that we've talked about. And then you would show how you have applied it in your classroom, or if you're not currently a teacher and you're not in a classroom, how you would like to apply it in a classroom. In order to show us this application, you could arrange a class observation. So you could have one of the LPAC committee members or myself come and observe you. Of course, this isn't possible for everyone. Some of you are living far from all of us, but if you're living near one of us, you could arrange this, Or for example, maybe you're living in Voi, which is not so close to me, but if you were in Voi and you and a couple other teachers scheduled observations, it would be worth my while to come out to view a couple of classes, so with different teachers. That might be true for other LPAC committee members as well. If that's not an option, you could do a small presentation. So you would do this during one of our LPAC meetings and take about 15 minutes just to kind of show us how you implemented or applied something in your classroom. You could also share a video with us in the group, and the video shows us what you did. Or you can do this as a written reflection in which you describe what you did, why you did it, and what the result is. In the WhatsApp group, I've shared a document that has some more specifics of this. And basically in any of these, the project should include what aspect of a section is being addressed, why you've chosen it, and what the result is. So for example, maybe today you decided to do the last activity we did. You notice that your students are using very boring vocabulary and you're pushing them to use more exciting vocabulary. So you decided to do that activity. And so maybe you have a short video of what you did and the video encloses some of the work. Or maybe you do this as a presentation or reflection, or you invite someone to come and see you. So it should include all of these aspects. Whatever you decide to do, and you don't have to do this if you are a busy person and you don't need to do this. If you do decide to do this, you will get a special certificate of mastery rather than just a certificate of participation. All of the projects are due by July 31st, and that would give me or anyone else time to have a look at them and to distribute the certificates, as I'll be leaving in about mid-August for a couple weeks before coming back. If you're doing something like a class observation, then you would need to make sure that you get in touch with someone, and it's dependent on their schedule. So if no one can meet you at the time that you want, then you would need to choose something else. Same thing with the presentations. If 40 people decide they want to do presentations, that won't be possible. I don't think 40 people will want to do that. So please think about your scheduling. And I think to that note, Jane, I think you had some words to share about the scheduling and a Google form you're creating.
Yes, thank you so much, Mina. I'm excited about this. This is something that we have looked together as a team and see that we need the follow-up. And most importantly, the follow-up is just to be able to share some of the inspiration that we have had as a group here in the online classes, and also to get to improve ourselves and also get to offer support to one another. And therefore, we came up with this idea of having a follow-up. And we are going to I'll be sharing with you the Google form on the WhatsApp groups. And we're going to maybe check, you're going to fill in your location, your place of work. Maybe are you a classroom teacher? Are you a student? Are you a lecturer? Then you're going to maybe choose the option that you would like to show your applied knowledge gained through this session. Then maybe we can also have a place where you can also express something else that you would want us to address. So you're very much welcome to get to fill the Google form to give us more information, and also to in future be able to improve our learning and get to know which are the best ways to be able to practice what we are learning. Thank you very much, Mina.
Thank you, Jane. That was very clear. I'm sure there will be more questions about it. As I said, I shared a more comprehensive document that gives a little bit more specifics about the length of the reflection or video or whatnot. And then of course, there'll be more clarity, I think, after the Google form as well. So we look forward to seeing what you all do, and Yeah, and this is all in the spirit of learning. It's one thing to be a passive learner and watch. And I think a lot of you actually are applying your knowledge. And so this is a chance for you to share and demonstrate the great work that you're doing. All right, with that, I will turn it over to Austin.
Okay, thank you very much, Mina, and also Jane. I think you guys have really brought this out clearly. I just want to say that, first of all, we know we have done a number of sessions, about 24, but if you are joining today, don't worry. The thing is that we have all the copies and the presentations. It's only that we have to organize how you can get them. That is if you want to go through them. For those who have just joined, that is number one. Number two, we are very impressed as LPAC in terms of people registering and all that. And this is why we kept telling you guys that we have a lot of things we want to roll out. But it becomes better when you know you are fully registered member, so that you can fully benefit. Even for this certificate we are giving, I'm happy to let you guys know that we are engaging TSC so that we see if some of these things we do can be recognized. So there's quite a lot for us. And also, if you're not teaching, you do not have to worry. Some of these things you are doing will actually add a lot of value to what you have been doing, because you are engaged and you are doing a lot of learning. And of course, you're going to apply them and all that. So I just want to thank you all, and also want to thank those who are joining for the first time. You can reach out to me. I'd already shared my contacts there, or Mina or any other LPAC official. And I still want to insist, when you log in, type your name on the gadget that you're logging in with. When your gadget is reading techno or is just reading numbers, definitely, when we are reviewing all these things, definitely we'll just lock you out and say, we never saw you. So this is just a good habit that we need to nurture as teachers. So thank you all. And of course, for those who have joined us, we always have these sessions every Tuesday in the evening. And like Mina just said, we will be ending these sessions at the end of July. That's when we are going to come to the end, and we are going to roll out more exciting things. So all these things were not in vain, but they are leading us somewhere. And definitely there's quite a lot for us. And I also want to thank the teachers for their commitment. I know you guys are really committed. You have a lot of other things to do, but you always take your time to log in. So we look forward. We are excited about these sessions that we are going to roll out, and help us so that we can map out clearly. We know where you guys are, so that we even plan for more programs within your locations. What we actually want to do, we want to come to your locations. You know, we have been virtually. Now we want to come out there, you know, so that we can meet. We can understand your situation, even as a classroom teacher. You know, I can see Joel is really smiling. So Joel, we are really serious about this thing. We want to come out there. If there's a challenge within the department or within the school, we'll come and talk to those people and tell them to make your work easier, so that we can be able to learn and also be able to impact positively on our students. So thank you all, and back to you, Mina.
Thank you very much for sharing all of that. I also just, some of the members here are also part of the Schools Conversation Club. So just a reminder that if your school wants to participate in the debate competition, today is the last day to sign up on the Google form. It's on the Schools Conversation Club WhatsApp group. And then we are meeting tomorrow to talk about poetry with the schools, and the literate gardener will be sharing some of his poems as well as his writing process too. So hopefully your students will find that interesting and useful, and that will lead us into a future poetry competition as well. I don't know, Rukia, you don't have to, but would you like to talk at all about those future competitions that we have going on, or would you like to wait?
Not really much at the moment, but what I can say in summary, the competitions that were voted was poetry, debates, and essay writing. There was also spelling bee, but the logistics of doing the spelling bee might be tricky. So what we will be having is the poetry, debates, and the essay. The essay topics will be given beforehand, maybe in July, but before the topics are given, the students will be guided as to the requirements of writing an essay, so that now when they're given the topic, they can easily work on it. And also the other competitions, we will have like a educational session, then a mock, and then the regional competitions, then a final competition. So we will keep on sharing more on this as we proceed. I'm happy to see all of you teachers here and your students joining these competitions.
Thanks, Rukia. Yeah, so as Austin was saying, we've got a lot going on. So I think that's all from me. I look forward to seeing you all next week, if not sooner. And yeah, feel free to communicate with us through the chats for any questions that arise. Good night, everyone. Thanks very much. And cheers to your creativity. I enjoyed your rewrites of that text. That was awesome.
Thanks, Mina.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Everyone, bye.
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 Okay.
Good night.
Love you.
Good night.